by the hand of death!
Over 20 years ago, I designed a superhero world for an animated series. About 6 years ago, Eric asked me if I had any ideas that could bring our ensemble of lovely voiceover actors and friends together. And look at these guys. I mean, this is the cream of the crop. Yes, we love them, we know who they are as people, but in terms of voiceover, they are so good at it. Anyway, I dusted off my superhero world, changed it from a children's show to PG-13, and wrote a 100-page script of a show that I would like to watch. The cast of Crossing the Gods beautifully brought the script to life. I can't wait to share those performances. Each actor conveyed a palpable reality to their characters, which is necessary to make any story work, and Ken Kakmar is knocking it out of the park with the music. The visuals were originally going to be a few simple sketches per episode, but now it's evolved into something more, well, more. Let's take a look at the inspirations. From the 60s up into the 80s, Eerie was one of a handful of titles that contained more mature stories than the ones typically found in color comics. I think because the artwork was in black and white, it was free from certain editorial restrictions. Perhaps the assumption was color comics are obviously meant for kids, at least in the United States. The beautiful cover we opened with was by Frank Frazetta, but the interior art, which was black and white or grayscale, was typically done by artists like Gene Colan and Alex Toth, who were all masters in their field. I love how clear and expressive the line work is. It has precision and ease, and the way the shading is achieved through grayscale wash as opposed to crosshatching is very effective and somewhat more naturalistic. It's said that if a composition looks good in black and white, it'll look good in color. Oh, look out, wheelchair guy! I do love the 60s aesthetic. But these panels are a great example of classic silhouette, line work, and using grayscale to great advantage. But I was also inspired by an artist I found in the covers of Heavy Metal magazine, which reprints stuff from across the world. Juan Jimenez is an incredible illustrator with a fantastic imagination, making everything from starships to alien cultures to alien clothing to aliens themselves. He seems to be able to draw these fantastical worlds believably with ease. And in this image, we're looking at what is essentially a monochromatic image. It's blue and white instead of black and white. And it still communicates a very sophisticated and detailed image, but if we were to look at one of his more colorful pages, we see here that all the elements are in play, and if we take away those colors, we're not really losing a lot. I love how this feels. There's drama, there's character, there's life, there's specificity, and the technique of using those values within very simple line work, as in this example from Electra Lives Again. It creates something that feels very whole and yet also very clear. And I really like how this approach is a nice bridge between certain styles of illustration and what we typically see in animation. Animators and comic book artists have a similar challenge: create the best image in the least amount of time. Taking away the color process still gives me values, but simplifies it quite a bit. Maybe I'll colorize it later. Now that I have a clear reference point for our illustrated audio drama, let's see how I apply it to the characters. The original style way back 20 years ago was brighter and more comic book influenced, more bright colors and that sort of a thing, but I really like this more adult approach and this more grounded, realistic, representative look, meaning it wouldn't be hard to imagine this character Siren in our world. But she doesn't exist in our world. She lives in a more fantastic but just as real-feeling world, and that means a lot more imagery surrounding her, and I'm just a stupid voiceover guy. I've been pretty overwhelmed by this challenge. This is a shot of Cross walking along his campus, and oh, there's Vampirion sneaking up behind him. But let's take a look at the shot again, this time without the characters and from a slightly different angle. On this photo, I used a filter called Posterize in Photoshop. It's okay, it looks a little more illustrated. I also put it at different layers in After Effects to give it some depth. So let's try that on another shot. Here we go. Oh, that looks pretty bad. Yeah, I'm not happy with that. But I can't give up. So what if I tried to work with it? move through it quickly, throw it out of focus as soon as possible. Yeah, that helps, as well as establish some depth of field. That's good. And for the most part, I think that shot works, but this one, ew! Not working. And this one is just so-so. And this one looks just way too much like a photo for my tastes. Overall, I'd say I found something pretty inconsistent. When it works, like now, it's pretty good. This pop-up book kind of feel is something I actually like. But it's the imagery, the filter itself that I'm having issues with, especially in this shot. Oh my god, zooming into this window is a complete travesty. The following shot, not so bad. To find a better solution, I decide to research and look at some other shows that were dealing with many of the same challenges. I loved working on this motion comic both as an audio producer as well as an actor, but look at this background. That's a photograph. It's okay. It works better here, it's blurred out. This example is so-so, but for the most part I guess it works. And I have huge respect for Continuity Studios. This is also pretty effective, but this shot is a good example of where the integration isn't what it could be, or what it has been in previous shots, so we get that inconsistency. So, let's look to this example. This was done by Magnetic Dreams, and they're using Assad Ribic's painted artwork in the foreground, and in the background it's supported by what looks like painted artwork. Maybe this was lifted from a panel in the book, maybe this was too, and only the digital Loki was inserted. But this is a three-dimensional construct, and they're using the painting texture or skin on the geometry of the CGI. This is manipulated illustration here and here, and now we return again to the CG models, which are integrating pretty seamlessly. In this next example, also from Magnetic Dreams, we have the best integration, because the figure in the foreground was painted in the same panel as the plane in the background. All the elements match. Say what you will about the mouth movement and other stuff. This is great integration. And in this stylish example from Spider-Woman Agent of S.W.O.R.D., we see some things to aim for and maybe some things to avoid. The video playing in the background out the window is a good solution. It would take forever and cost so much money to animate all of that. And using video, throwing it in the background, changing the color balance to match the coloring of the illustrations, I think works for the most part. There's also the window itself that's obscuring it some. But this, while I give them all the credit in the world, simply doesn't feel integrated. It's not that I dislike the style of this CG animation, but compared to this, it feels like it's out of place. Of course we can quote-unquote forgive them for that, but I'd rather not have to ask that of my audience. This combined technique of CG in the background and illustration in the foreground looks a lot better in black and white, so I'm definitely keeping that. Now that I've learned a thing or two, let's see how I apply it. Here, Finn is in almost a CG set with illustrations outside. These two shots are the same pop-up book approach we've seen before, and now we're back to the 3D set. It's really like 2.5D. I created this in After Effects, which isn't meant for 3D animation, but you can put two-dimensional imagery in three-dimensional space, which is all this is. I'm glad I experimented to this stage, and it's an interesting combination of feeling more dimensional and simultaneously less dimensional. The limitations are clear, especially in shots like this, and trying to get windows on that frame would be a beast with this approach. So I need a new approach, something to take me to the next level. So I bit the CGI bullet, got a plane and threw it on my clouds, and yeah, that looks better in certain ways. And I was excited by this for a while, so much so that I built the cockpit in Blender. I bought those chairs, but everything else is something I designed and put textures on the surfaces. There's Sigma 8 in the background. So these consoles were a lot of fun for me to come up with what's happening on each of those panels, and I like that they're animated. I think it creates a nice credibility to the situation and to the ambience. And here, now, clearly he's two-dimensional there. He wasn't supposed to be shot from that angle. But what I'm really doing with this pass is checking out the details, and they're holding up for me. This looks pretty thoroughly thought through, but I'm struggling making the surfaces look like they were colored by hand, and the lines don't look like they were hand-drawn, so these kind of look like illustrations in a gray video game. So, here we are at frustration once again, and anybody who has made anything knows this feeling well. I'm glad I made those explorations. It gave me a better idea of what I want and what I don't. And this is much closer to what I want. These new filters provide a better integration with my illustration style. This is the same shot, just with a little depth of field to throw it out of focus as we approach. It's so important for me to establish the look of the backgrounds because I have to continue that through the series or else it looks inconsistent and a little wonky. And quote-unquote backgrounds, while we take them for granted, they're the world the character lives in, and ultimately those backgrounds, that world, should have a character in and of itself. Oh, speaking of characters, that's my fan art of Mara Jade, and oh, hey, no colors here. Cut that out. Get out of here, you. None of these shots are from the show. These are just test shots to see how well the technique is working and to point out some things that don't work as well, but for the most part, I think this is a much more successful approach to achieving that old-fashioned black and white comic book style that I've been aiming for. Yeah, like that. That looks pretty similar. And it also has a more personal feel to it, and the story of Crossing the Gods is surprisingly personal. Maybe I'll do a Kickstarter so I can employ people to help me, but for now, if it's all up to me, at least things are looking up.